so I'm going to ask a question just so that I can know what I should spend more time on and maybe what I should spend less. How many of you have heard of Joseph Campbell? Oh, yay. Now, how many of you have read The Hero with a Thousand Faces? Okay, cool. When I ask all of you, this is great because this means that it isn't totally fresh. Oh, I want to talk about the fact, just quickly, I've given different versions of a talk like this to a bunch of different CWC chapters. It's a great organization. If you are in a position where you'd like to be the state rep for the club, it's a great opportunity because the organization is a terrific one and has some really exciting things going on all over the state. So, when I say the hero's journey, what does that bring to anybody's mind?
Transformation.
Okay, transformation, good.
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, keep that thought in mind.
Redemption.
Ulysses also, good one. I'm sorry?
Redemption.
Redemption, yes.
Star Wars.
Star Wars. George Lucas wrote Star Wars you'll see, this is the cover of The Hero with a Thousand Faces. He wrote it with that open on his, at that point next to his typewriter. I want to make clear to you that it is in fact a plot structure, but it's more than that. It is a tool for creating experiences that are transformative. It isn't just about science fiction like Star Wars or fantasy, epic fantasy, Ulysses, Wizard of Oz, right? It is a scheme that has been used by songwriters, by video game designers, by amusement park ride designers, to create an experience that the audience, whether they're a reader or a park goer or a game player or whatever, experiences as transformative. Okay? Can I see that on the next slide? Could you go back one, please? That's it. I have the PDF of these slides up at this address, stillpointdigital.com/CWC/hero-journey.pdf. And there's going to be one more file. I'm going to give you a URL later, but I want to give everybody a second to write that down. It's up there now. If you want to download these later, please do. They will be up there for at least another week. Okay? Okay, next. Do we need to go back? Okay. If you need to take a picture, take a picture.
Oh, I always forget that.
I know, our cameras. See, this is because you're not a teenager like my daughters. My daughters have their cameras out taking pictures of everything. Okay. Can we go on? Everybody ready? Next one? Thank you. So the hero's journey. In this talk, I'm going to quickly talk about Joseph Campbell, who was the author of The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and give some context for what he was doing with it, and why it is useful for us. We're going to go through a quick overview of what the hero's journey is, and then I'm going to walk you through 3 classic examples that all of you should know at least 2 of. I'm going to guess. Oh, thank you. That's actually really helpful. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so Joseph Campbell was when he was a young graduate student, 1927, he was studying the Arthurian romances. And he went off to Paris, because actually a lot of the Arthurian romances were written in France and Germany. And so he went to study Arthurian romance, that's why he went there. But come on, it was Paris in 1927. So he gets there, and he walks into Shakespeare and Company and picks up a copy of Ulysses and has his mind blown. Ulysses, not Odysseus, but same idea. He begins to be exposed to Picasso and all of the modern art that was going on at the time. he also begins to, as he's studying these medieval Old French and medieval Middle English texts, he starts, and German, Old German, he starts to realize that as he's researching them, there are ties in with traditional Hindu stories, with the Arabian Nights, with stories not just from Western Europe, but from around the world. He also, this is Europe in 1927, is exposed for the first time to the idea of depth psychology. And this is important. So he's exposed to the teachings of essentially two major early 20th century psychologists, psychiatrists. Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. And he goes back in 1929, having spent 2 years studying all of this amazing stuff, and he says, I want to expand my thesis. How many of you have had a graduate degree? If you went and said, I want to expand my thesis, what would they have said? No, that's not what you do. We can narrow it down. You don't expand it. And so he ended up quitting in October of 1929, at which point the entire economy collapsed. And he was out of work for 5 years. And so he spent 5 years reading and wandering around the country. He worked with Doc Ricketts down at where the Monterey Bay Aquarium is now, studying mollusks up and down the Pacific coast. He drove across the country. He met amazing people. He did all kinds of remarkable things and read. Got a job first at a high school and then at Sarah Lawrence College, which was a new college for women, very progressive college for women. And he taught there for another 34 years. And what he taught was English literature and mythology. And as he was teaching mythology, he began to put together this idea that he called How to Read a Myth. And what he was doing as he was laying this out, he was looking at all of the world's myths, back to Gilgamesh, is the oldest written myth we have, but also symbolic stories, the Marin and Aztec stories, the cave art, all of these stories that tell, all of these symbols that tell stories. And he realized that all of them, if you really look at it, follow a very similar structure, and not just the ancient, but all the way up to the modern. And not just the modern, but as he applied what he had learned from his study of Freud and Jung, the psychological. Okay, so here are 1,000 Faces he published in 1949, and that was the book that he had started calling How to Read a Myth. Okay, it was an instant, not a bestseller, but it was a bit of it was a very exciting book, not just to academics, although they loved it, not just to psychiatrists, although they loved it, but also to artists who realized what they were seeing was not just a description of how stories had been told and how that applied to psychology, but also how you could tell a story. Okay? And how you could tell a story, for him, a myth was not just a story. A myth was a symbol of and trigger for a transformative experience. Okay? The hero in these stories is this character out here, but each of us identifies with the hero, so we are the hero. Now, I'm going to be talking about heroes the rest of the time here, but when I say hero, I mean male or female. He uses both male and female examples in the book, and the 3 examples I'm going to use at the end, there's 2 women and a man, a woman, a girl, and a man. So this is not a hero guy thing, and it's not all about guy with sword bashing things. The hero in the hero's journey is undergoing a journey, and that journey can be a hero with a sword bashing things, but it can also be psychological and inward. Because ultimately, it's symbolic of an inward transformation. Okay, next. So, keep going. I think I've just covered all of this. And this is the important part. He was looking at all of these stories through a Freudian Jungian lens. And it was the first time anybody had done that. People looked at myth anthropologically, historically, comparative religion maybe, if they were feeling like it. Campbell used to define myth as other people's religion, which I think is a pretty good definition. He was looking at it in terms of how these stories affect the individual. So, hit the next one. Okay? He came up with an idea for this circle. We're going to look at it. And what he called it, using a term from his favorite author, James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, he called it the monomyth, as in a story that is the same story everywhere. The single story told over and over. The hero with 1,000 faces. One hero, 1,000 faces, right? In the book, he calls it the hero adventure, and it has been come into the public consciousness as the hero's journey. The hero's journey is a registered trademark of the Joseph Campbell Foundation, which I am the managing editor of the collected works of Joseph Campbell. I've worked for the Campbell Foundation for the last 20 years. But just to make it clear, when you say the hero's journey, that is a registered trademark. So just know that. The hero's adventure, on the other hand, is just copyrighted in the book, so you're okay.
So we can't use that in our title.
Nope.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I thought titles were not,
Trademarks are. Now, you can always ask. We license it. But I'll tell you why we registered the trademark. It's okay with us that people want to have their hero's journey workshops on whatever, this, that, and the other. It's a little uncomfortable that we don't know who they are and we don't know what version of the hero journey that they're walking people through. But when we started in the early days of the internet seeing hero's journey massage parlors, hero's journey motorcycle shops, tattoo parlors, all kinds of things, and it was like, well, those are great businesses. We have no problem with these businesses, but I really don't feel comfortable having Joseph Campbell, associated with these things. So, and they have nothing to do with what he was talking about. So we trademarked it, and so all you have to do is ask. Okay, the hero's journey. The main thing that distinguished his idea of a plot from the classical Aristotelian, right? Inciting action, rising action, climax, falling action, conclusion, right? That's the 5-act Aristotelian mountain. His version of it, next slide here, is that it's a circle, okay? I usually turn the sound off when we do that. Don't worry about it. We're going to see that in much more detail in a second, okay? And it's something that's a little easier to read. So let's go to the next slide. And one more. There are 3 parts to the basic hero journey. Okay? Aristotle had the 5 acts. Campbell talked about there being 3 essential parts. The first was separation. The separation is where the hero ventures forth from the world of common day into a region of supernatural wonder. You start in what he called the village compound, the boring home, the place that you just can't stand anymore because it's the place you've always been. Or maybe you love it, but now there's a problem. Okay? It is the world of your everyday. And you have to, or you are called to, venture forth into a different world, the world of supernatural wonder. Next one. In the world of supernatural wonder, you undergo the second stage of the hero journey, which is called initiation. The initiation is where fabulous forces are there encountered, and a decisive victory is won, sometimes. This is his definition from the book, by the way. There are many cases where the decisive victory isn't won. Okay, tragedy often. you get there, Odysseus finds out the truth and plucks out his eyes. Okay? Often there are heroes who look up and say, yeah, I can't do it. Often in this stage, the hero has to go through either a symbolic or an actual death. Why? Because the whole point of it is psychological and personal transformation. Who the hero was and who the hero is about to become, there needs to be a dividing line. The hero has to die to who he or she was in order to become who she or he will become. Does that make sense?
Sometimes metaphysically.
Sometimes metaphysical, sometimes metaphorical, sometimes symbolic. Sometimes, if it's Harry Potter, actual, and then you come back, or Jesus, you die, you come back. Okay? Sometimes it is nothing more than the vision of yourself that you used to have crumbles, and now you see the truth. And you have died to yourself and been reborn. Okay? Remember, this is an inward psychological process as much as it is a symbolic outward process. Next one. The third and essential step that people always forget, because everybody gets hung up on these two, is the return. It's a circle, right? We saw that was a circle. Next one. Thank you so much. The hero comes back from the mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man, or her fellow man, or whatever you want to say. The boon can be wisdom. The Buddha is enlightened, comes back, and is able to teach. Right? The Buddha was not a Buddhist. He taught Buddhism. Right? The boon can be magic that you didn't have before, but now you have it. The boon can be money, gold. The boon can be a magic weapon that allows you to defeat the evil creatures that are, attacking your village. The magic that I would, Luke Skywalker used the Force, right? He turns off the computer, connects to himself. He has the strength and ability to do that, and therefore is able to destroy the Death Star that was about to destroy all of his friends. Okay? The boon is a symbol of the transformation into which the hero was initiated. Does that make sense? Next one. Now, in the book, we have this all laid out. And I'm going to go to the next one. And you'll see it's a little bit easier to see here. And you can't quite see the URL at the bottom. I'm so sorry. This is actually from The Hero with 1,000 Faces, the 2009 edition that we published 10 years ago. God, wow, that makes me feel. Yeah. Well, now it pushes off the top.
Okay.
But basically, it is stillpointdigital.com/CWC/hero, and instead of journey, it's Hero Circle, and it's not PDF. I didn't change that. It's .jpg. Okay? Hero-journey.jpg. HeroCircle.jpg. Okay? Don't. Because what's going to happen is it pushes the top off. So, I want to point out, here we have the 3 stages, right? They're just enumerated in much greater detail. We have the separation, we have the initiation, we have the return. The separation starts with an event called the call to adventure. You've probably maybe heard of that. The call to adventure can be anything. Again, going back to Harry Potter, you're a wizard, Harry. All of a sudden, everything is different because you've been told, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. Luke hears that, and his life is different. Jonah, God comes down and says, go to talk to the Ninevites. Now, Jonah, does he listen to the call to adventure? How many of you remember the story of Jonah? He says, not going to go to Nineveh. No, not going to do that. And he runs, and he gets into a boat and tries to sail away. And God doesn't put up with that and says, too bad, you're going to Nineveh. and he sends storms, and ultimately a big whale. Right? And Jonah has to jump off the boat into the belly of the whale, and that leads us to our threshold. Crossing the threshold from the land of the everyday into the land of adventure. There's always a distinct point where you go from one to the other. And I'll show you some examples of this in the movies that I'm going to show you in a minute. Okay? There's often a series of tests. There are magical helpers that will show up. Wise people, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Dumbledore. These are fantasy, but also, in a regular story, it can be the helpful neighbor. It can be your best friend who knows something that you don't know. It helps you make that transition. The big important thing about the world, the land of adventure, as opposed to the world of the everyday, is that none of the rules that apply in the world of the everyday apply in the land of adventure. It is the land where you get to rewrite the rules. And we'll see examples of that. Okay? Which is why you are able to die to yourself and be reborn, because you're in a place where the rules are upside down, or where they at least don't apply. There are a series of very common tests that he goes into great length and talks about. The sacred marriage, which is both a positive and a negative thing sometimes. So if it's a male hero, there will be a female goddess figure. Or sometimes it's a female and a male god figure. Sometimes that is a negative thing, where the god or goddess Circe is a negative. Calypso, sweet, she's a negative. Nausicaa, very sweet. She is not what Odysseus wants. He wants to get back to Penelope. And so he goes through this series of sacred marriage tests, and each time says, no, that you're not what I want. Father atonement. Luke, I am your father. Okay? Mother atonement for the female. The relationship to the same sex, this is very young. The same sex parent, the opposite sex parent, right? Coming into accord with that thing that was outside of you, you now make it in you. Apotheosis is becoming part of the universe, becoming one with God. Okay? So this is usually religious stuff. The Buddha, the Nirvana of the Buddha, the Passion of the Christ. This is, by the way, if you read the Gospels, this is it, right here. You read the life of the Buddha. This is it, right here. The elixir theft is one of my favorites. There's a lot of wonderful stories, Native American stories, Russian stories, the classic Greek example of this is Prometheus stealing fire from Olympus and giving it to the humans, and they have to run because it's not supposed to be theirs. So if you go through these three, sometimes the return can be very positive and lovely and sweet, very romantic. It's lovely. You return with your wonderful bride. You return with your new relationship with your parent, who is now you. You return, enlightened. In this case, you stole something from the gods. They're going to chase you. And there's all kinds of fabulous stories where you have to evade them in different ways. And you throw down a mirror, it becomes a lake. You throw down your comb, it becomes a mountain. That's a series of Russian stories that I love. That's the motif. There's a story from the Mabinogion where Merlin essentially has to evade this witch that was his teacher. And it's the same thing. So you fly, and then the same threshold that you crossed before, as you cross out of the world of adventure, you're going to cross back. But this time, you are carrying the elixir, the boon, the gold, the magic, the wisdom, the weapon, the whatever it was that you didn't have before that is going to allow you to change yourself, but also the world around you. Next one. Now, that is it, and that is up there. I meant to print out a bunch of copies, that's why I gave you the URL. All narrative writing and that means fiction and nonfiction. For those of you who write how-tos, this is going to be a little less useful, but even so, you're leading somebody through an experience, right? So that is still narrative. All narrative writing, next one, in tres partes divisa est, is divided into 3 parts. That was my little Julius Caesar joke. I'm sorry. Next one. The first one is character. Next one. Second one is plot. And the third one is setting. When we think of the hero journey, which one of these 3 do you think of? Plot. Character, maybe, right? Character development.
After plot.
Setting. It's all 3. It's all 3. And one of the workshops that I actually really loved doing this particular talk through with, looking at the hero journey with, totally focused on setting. Because if you think about it, the world of the everyday and the world of adventure, those are 2 different places. And if you use that distinction, you're helping to make that story happen. Next one. So the hero's journey involves them all. So as we go through here, we'll look at what ways does the hero journey look at character, and what ways does it look at plot, and what ways does it look at setting. Next. So what's the first stage? Is separation. So you start where? In the world of the everyday. Anybody recognize this?
Dorothy. Wizard of Oz.
Wizard of Oz. There's Dorothy. Does she love Kansas at the beginning of the movie? Yeah. It's okay. It's home. The lady, the evil lady, is bothering her. There's bad things, and the elders never listen to her. So it's kind of an annoying, boring place. Okay.
It's my own stage.
She's a teenager. Oh no! This is a psychological, personal transformation that she goes through from being a teenager to being an adult. Next one. Child to an adult, really. How about this one, World of Common Day? Anybody recognize this one? Can you read this at the bottom? Spade and Archer. This is the Maltese Falcon. There's Sam Spade, rolling a cigarette and chewing the fat with his partner. Is this going to last?
No.
Oh no! No. Next one. Here's another one.
Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind. And can you do the back button once? I just want to show you something. Okay. I want you to look. There's sunlight coming through the window. This is a very bright day. This is San Francisco. How many bright days do we get? Never. That's true. This one is one of them. Now go to the next one. Okay. Now, anybody recognize this lovely lady? Scarlett O'Hara. What color is she wearing?
White.
Oh, yes. Why, yes, she is. And the flowers are blooming. There's white peacocks and white flowers. And everything is nice and light and white. Except the people that work on the plantation. But that's a whole other thing. She is uninitiated. She has yet to go through her hero journey. Now, she loves Tara. She thinks it's great. Things are going to change. Next one. The next stage is what we call the call to adventure and the crossing of the threshold. Now, I put this picture in. Anybody recognize this picture?
Dorothy leaving the house in
Yes.
Neverland.
I want to tell you a quick story about this because I find it funny. I was, as a kid, grew up in a house with black and white television. We never had color TV. So I watched this movie a bazillion times. Went off to college, and it was traditional that in the spring, in the big theater, they would show The Wizard of Oz. Maybe it was the end of at the end of one of the terms, they would show The Wizard of Oz in the big theater, and it was obviously not black and white, and everybody loves the movie. We were watching it along. We're a bunch of college students. We're making silly noises. We get to this point. She opens the door, it's color. I gasped because I didn't realize that the movie was in Technicolor. in Oz. I was the last human being on the face of the earth to have the experience that they intended. Okay? And I'm proud of that. So she is crossing from the everyday world of sepia tone, black and white. Kansas. Is that Kansas? What does she say?
Not anymore, Toto.
We're not in Kansas anymore. Okay, next picture. This is Bullitt Street in San Francisco. If you go there, there's a plaque up there where Bridget O'Shaughnessy shot Miles Archer. Okay, and she shot him at the top of the street. He rolled down the hill, and when Sam Spade crosses across that barrier, his whole world turns upside down. Because what he thought was this very boring, chasing couples that are having affairs and tracking down this young woman's sister and all these normal, boring things that people pay you to do. All of it gets turned upside down. Quick question.
So, this crossing this threshold is often inadvertent. He doesn't know he's crossing it.
No, but you want to know what his call to adventure was? Bridget O'Shaughnessy comes into his office. The woman he comes to learn is named Bridget O'Shaughnessy. Comes into his office and sells him this sob story about her young socialite sister that left with some scoundrel, and now she can't find her, and will Sam Spade please just help her? Is any of that true?
No.
No, but that's his call to adventure. He's been told, here, something interesting is going to happen, and it's not usual. It's not your usual stuff, and she's beautiful, and he thinks he's beautiful. And so he says, yeah, okay. And by taking that case, Miles Archer gets shot in the back, and everything gets turned upside down. Nice, bright, sunny day in San Francisco, right?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. And it won't be for the rest of the movie. It's going to be nighttime for the rest of the movie. Okay? Keep going. Yeah, for more. Okay? This, anybody recognize the scene? Scarlett finds out, first of all, I think somebody's died, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time.
Her first husband.
Her first husband has died. And she finds out she has to go, I believe, to Atlanta. Okay? The magical world of adventure in Gone with the Wind is Atlanta. Go figure. Okay? But is she wearing white now? She will never wear white again. The colors of the screen will never be white again. It's dark and gray and, beautiful colors. And she's got her beautiful red hair. But it will never be virginal, sweet, innocent again, ever. She is being transformed. Next one. Now we enter the region of supernatural wonder. Well, this is clearly a region of supernatural wonder, and the journey that they go on is on a freaking road. It's real easy to see. Now, I want to point something out. You can't quite see it, but all three of these movies were made by the same film company, Warner Brothers, in the same year. Do you guys remember when I said Here With a Thousand Faces was published? 49. You know what movie these three movies were made?
1939.
1939. All three of them in 1939, 10 years before The Hero with a Thousand Faces. So when I used to do this, I would use Harry Potter and Star Wars and Matrix and all those sorts of movies. And people say, yeah, well, of course, because they followed it because they made the movie after the book was published. The best examples I've ever found are these three movies, and they were made 10 years before. And I want to tell you something else. Joseph Campbell never watched a single one of them.
Really?
He was not much of a movie buff. He did not really go to the movies that much. And when he did, it was mostly really avant-garde stuff. That was his taste. He had a lot of friends. He lived in Greenwich Village, and he would go and see their bizarre, Luis Buñuel and Maya Deren's and all of that stuff.
So what you're saying is
They did not influence each other. Oh, 1949. Can anybody tell me another famous book about a hero journey, published in 1949. I'm cheating. The Fellowship of the Ring. Joseph Campbell, J.R.R. Tolkien, studying the same stuff. They both studied medieval literature, they both studied language, they both studied mythology. I have been through all of Campbell's stuff. I've contacted Tolkien's estate. We have no record of them ever reading each other's work or of communicating with each other, which shocks me because they actually had a lot in common. Mostly, they both understood the same story. So Campbell wasn't trying to say, this is how you should write a story. He was saying, this is how stories are created that will be experienced as transformative.
Yeah, I watched, just last night, watched the third movie of Lord of the Rings, and I'm just amazed at how much it was following this.
It follows it almost exactly. Now, Peter Jackson had read the book, so he definitely goes towards that. But if you look at it, it is very much so. When my kids started reading Harry Potter, I reached out to J.R. Rowling, and I was working with the Campbell Foundation. This is about 5 years after I started working with them, and I was about to start editing The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and I emailed her and said, hey, any chance you could talk to me? I want to know, have you read this book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces? That's all I wanted to know. Well, she was a little busy and she was kind of famous. So her agent's secretary finally got back to me and said, she really, I can't put this stuff in front of her. Contact her when she's less busy, and I've tried again, and she's always busy. But one of these days, if I ever get her alone in a room, one of the things I'm going to ask is, have you read it? Because her books follow, each of the single books follows the hero journey cycle. The entire cycle follows the hero journey. It starts and ends in the same place. Platform 9 3/4 is where you really kick off. That's the crossover. That's the crossing the threshold. Platform 9 3/4 is where the series ends. Okay? Hold on a second. I don't care whether she read it or not. Because if she read it, then she used it, and it was helpful, and how wonderful. If she hadn't read it, Neil Gaiman, you guys know who Neil Gaiman is? Somebody handed him this the way they did to George Lucas, and he read the first 60 pages and said, I'm not going to read it. And he said, either it's true, and I don't want to know, or it's not true, and how is that helpful? But he said, no, and if you look at Neil Gaiman's stories, they all follow this. He instinctively tells stories that lead you through this kind of a journey. So, Land of Supernatural Wonder is where all the magic happens, literally. Next one. Okay? In the Maltese Falcon, we get introduced to this crew of characters, okay, who change. Campbell talks about shapeshifters. Well, these are shapeshifters. Who they are, who's a friend, who's an enemy, what their names are, changes. Is Kudler a friend? Is he an enemy? What is her name? Well, it's Bridget O'Shaughnessy, as we find out. We think he's just kind of weird, but my favorite. So you have entered this world. It's night. None of the rules of the daytime apply, and even who people are is dreamlike and a little vague. Okay? Because everything is about his transformation. That's the story. Not whether he finds the black bird, not whether he finds out who killed Miles Archer, but his transformation. Next one. Her region of supernatural wonder is, in fact, Atlanta. And she goes through balls there, and she gets all kinds of adventures there, and ultimately, what wonderful thing happens to Atlanta? It burns to the ground. That's the first scene they shot, by the way. They hadn't even cast her when they started setting up the scene. And so, remember when I talked about the fire theft? This is kind of an inversion of that. She's fleeing the fire. That's her crossing back across the threshold. What her boon has been, what do you think she's learned? Well, we'll find out. Next one. So, what happens is you get taken out of the world, the tornado comes, takes you away, you're not in Kansas anymore, you go through the adventures, and you gain something magical. The boon, the elixir. What boon does she gain?
There's no place like home.
That's it. And are they listening to her now?
Yes.
Yes, they are. Does she have her dog? Yes. She has gone through an experience they haven't gone through. They don't understand it. They don't necessarily believe all of it. But they're listening to her. Because she's not a little girl anymore. She's now a young woman. And she has been transformed by the experience of going through Oz and learning that there is no place like home. Right here. Okay? And look, all of the people that were in Oz are here. Same actors, different characters. And now we're back in black and white. Next. If you remember the Maltese Falcon, his return across the threshold, Bridget O'Shaughnessy says, "Oh, we can find it together, and we'll be together forever, it's wonderful," and he does. He's falling in love with her. What does he do? He gives her to the police and says, "This is the dame that shot my partner." Okay? And he returns to the world of the everyday. I can't remember if he ends back in his office. I don't think he does. Yeah. Oh, well, he's always got a cigarette. But if you look closely, there's light. The sun's coming out. They're headed back into the world of the everyday. He has said to her, "I'll be here when you get out in 20 years, doll." Because he is. He's fallen in love with it. But his boon is that he has learned not to be fooled by the exterior. Right? Next one. This is the last one. And look, she comes back to the beautiful, beautiful home. And look what is here. It is a disaster. And she is now the mistress of this place. Isn't that lovely? And when she turns to Red Butler and is like, "Well, we can make a go of this," what does he tell her?
Frankly, ma'am.
"I don't give a damn." And he leaves. What does she learn? Oh, notice what color she's wearing. She's not wearing the dark black, the blues of the that she was wearing in Atlanta. She's wearing red, faded red. Because she is now a woman. She is, better or for worse, on her own. Right? She's a widow. Twice at this point, right?
Right.
What boon did
Tomorrow is another
Tomorrow is
day.
another day.
Tomorrow is another day. Endure. Okay, we'll talk about the fact that in the Odyssey, there were 3 hero journeys. Telemachus looking for his father. Odysseus tells his story to Nausicaa and her father of the return from Troy back, and now he's on his way back to Ithaca. What's the 3rd hero journey in the Odyssey? Penelope. Does she go off on a journey and see far places and battle monsters? No. She literally keeps the home fires burning, and she battles the monsters that are these suitors, not with swords or arrows or axes, but with her wits, which, as we know, is Odysseus' also main attribute, is his wit. Okay? Odysseus' journey is through time and space. Telemachus' journey is through time and space. Her journey is just through time. But it's a journey. You don't have to go someplace new for it to be a hero journey. But the experience is the same. You have to be in a place where the things that did apply don't apply anymore. Okay? And that's basically it. The next one. And that's, there we are. That's it.
So basically,
Yes, the point that Campbell was trying to make is that for as long as we have had stories, the hero's journey has been the structure through which we've told the stories about transformation. It is timeless. It is universal. There are versions of hero journey stories that follow this scheme in every culture, including ones that have never had any contact with, other places. His theory was that it was archetypal. If you know Carl Jung believed that there were certain psychological structures that were actually kind of baked into the human brain. The archetypes of the unconscious. Okay? The shadow, the persona structure, the anima animus, which is the ideal vision of the other, male if you're female, female if you're male, or female if you're female and homosexual, but that's a whole other thing. They were very good about that. But it is that image of the other, the shadow, which is the part of yourself that you would rather not recognize, the buried self. The self itself, which is not fully conscious, as opposed to the ego, which is sitting up here in the head and thinks it's in control but isn't. The hero journey is very much that same thing. Remember that circle with the line through it? Above the line is the conscious world. Below the line is the subconscious world of dreams and myth and everything that doesn't behave the way we expect it to behave. Does that make sense? So yeah, it's timeless and universal. Another question?
Where do you think these archetypes come from?
I don't know, but what I know that Campbell and Jung would have said is that they are actually built into the way our minds process ideas and information. That the hero journey represents the experience that each of us goes through in learning something new, in transforming ourselves into who we are going to be. Okay? So it is actually, he had studied biology. I talked to you about him going and counting mollusks with Eddie Ricketts. He had a strong belief that a lot of our psychology was grounded in physiology. And so he would have said that that's where it comes from. Now, ultimately, no one knows. The other thing he would have said is that, he tended to focus, when he was talking about mythology and comparative religion, he tended to focus on the human end of the equation. Because he said, what's out there, nobody knows. That's the whole point. You can't know. Does it come up from out there? Don't know. Yeah.
Something strikes me about, just to hear you say that, in astronomy, of course, there's the concept of dark matter. This is a major thing. There's a lot more dark matter than regular matter. And what is it? And we don't know what it is. But we know it must be there because we can see its effects. That sounds like the same thing you're saying about
That's
art.
exactly how, when I'm trying to explain to people, I had, as a young man, I was a professional actor. And editing was my day gig. Every actor has a day gig. This was mine. And my day gig took over because I liked it and it paid better. And it was steadier. One of my favorite acting teachers, this is back in the 80s, so it was before they had discovered a lot of extrasolar planets. So they were looking for them, and how they were looking for them was to see if there were any stars that wiggled, right? Where there was a gravity sink that was traveling around it that pulled it first one way and then the other. Okay? And that was the way that, at the time, that they were looking for planets. In fact, the first many extrasolar planets they discovered, that's how they discovered them, before they started looking at much more sophisticated ways of doing it, and now they're discovering, hundreds a year. The same thing is true in acting when you're trying to look at a character's eccentricities. Okay? A lot of young actors want to play eccentric. That's not very interesting. Nobody thinks of themselves as eccentric. Well, some people do, but that's a whole other thing. Real eccentricity is somebody who thinks they're behaving completely normally according to rules that nobody else knows. Does that make sense? So they have a strong gravity sink in their head that nobody else is aware of. Well, the same thing is true of the archetypes of the unconscious. They are things that we have no direct knowledge of, that you can't put a hand on, you can't point at it, you can't say, that's in the hippocampus or whatever. But people behave this way, and so we tend to think of them as being physiologically there. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Question?
So if I wanted to apply this idea in my writing,
please,
and I have two main characters, am I over interpreting or over extrapolating to say that both my main characters need to have a hero's journey?
They can.
Or they're not going to seem.
They won't be both. They won't be co-protagonists. Yeah. They will be a protagonist and either a secondary character or an antagonist.
Got it.
If you look at this is another thing from acting. Every character thinks they're the hero of the story, right? Anybody ever seen Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, the play by Tom Stoppard? Fabulous play. Fabulous play. It's about these two minor characters from Hamlet. And they are the main characters of the play because they think they're the main characters of the play. And Hamlet just sort of wanders through it. Okay? Well, that's true every character. It doesn't have to even be your main ones. If people are telling you that your secondary characters are flat, ask yourself, what journey are they on? What change happens to them during the course of the story? Maybe it's visible to the audience, maybe it isn't. But it might be a way for you, as the storyteller, to explore your characters, your minor characters in 3 dimensions. I told you, I'm working on the sequel to my first novel, okay? I got 2/3 of the way into it, this is a little over a year ago, and was writing madly and very happy, and I had a minor character who I was going to kill off, and I was going to kill her off, and I got there, and she said, "No! What is this? This isn't fair. You haven't even explored me. You haven't thought about me. I'm a nasty character at the beginning. I was a nasty character in the last book, and you're just going to kill me off, and I'll be a nasty character. That doesn't make any sense. How does that pay off for the, how does that pay off for me? But also, how does that pay off for the reader? And so I had to go back and look at it and think, that was a really boring way to tell the story. Unfortunately, what it meant is I had to unravel everything that I had done because it all sort of had been leading to, okay, then this girl dies, and then we unravel the plot. We figure out what's going on. It's a mystery. But if she doesn't die, if something else happens, I have to set that up way earlier. So I in fact, had to go back to the drawing board and start rewriting. And that's hard. I don't know, that's hard. So, her hero journey ended up being important. Who was it that asked that? You. So this minor character, who I had thought about her and who she was and why she was the way she was, but I hadn't thought about her a lot. So I had to go back and think, okay, what would she actually do in this situation? Why would she do it? And how would she be transformed by the experience? And by doing that, I think I'm making a much more interesting story, I hope.
Would those secondary characters and like this girl in yours and so on, shapeshifters? You mentioned something about
shapeshifters, metaphorically. So those 3 characters that we're talking to Sam Spade in the Maltese Falcon, they are shapeshifters in the sense that who they are doesn't stay the same from one scene to the next. Their allegiance to him, their story about why they're here, their names. Bridget O'Shaughnessy goes through about 5 different names during the course of the movie. And none of them are real, and I don't even know if the last one's real, but that's the one we end with. So that's the one I always give her. Okay? Shapeshifters are these dreamlike characters that represent the powers of the world of supernatural wonder.
So some minor characters, I don't know about Belle's book and yours, but could those characters be shapeshifters
Sure.
instead of having to go
But we don't
through
need to
their
think
own-
too literal about shapeshifters.
Okay.
I mean, yes, they can be people who aren't who they appear to be. They can be people who change their story in the middle. A shapeshifter, anybody remember, we were talking about E.T. before. Anyone remember E.T.? Yeah. The Peter Coyote character. He starts off as a villain. Is he a villain? No, he's a good guy. He's a scientist. But he needs to do something that makes all of these main characters very frightened in order to contain a situation that he has no control over. So he's trying to do the right thing. And so we experience him as a shapeshifter. Okay? Now you can have real shapeshifters too. Those are a universal character. You've got them in Native American stories, you've got them in Eastern European stories, you've got them in Greek stories, you've got them everywhere. Chinese stories. Just think about who your characters are and what that they're presenting represents who they really are. And sometimes those are the different things.
So I'm doing a trilogy.
Yes.
So there's an arc to the whole thing,
Yeah.
and then there are 3 separate arcs.
Yes.
So does that mean I have 4 heroes' journeys?
You have the opportunity for that.
They all have the same protagonist.
Well, then, again, I will use the Harry Potter series as a great example. Harry Potter goes through a single hero journey in every single one of those books. 7 books. 8 movies. He starts at the Dursleys, goes through an adventure, is transformed by the adventure, heads back to the Dursleys. My kids grew up with these books, so they were very much part of my family. So if you don't know the books, they're great books, but forgive me. But Harry starts off as an orphan kid who had no connection to the place that he was living, was told that he was a freak, was told that he was nothing, and that he couldn't do anything. Finds out that he's a wizard, goes through 7 years of battling the big bad guy, ultimately, literally dies. I hope I'm not spoiling anything. Probably am. But doesn't. He actually dies and comes back. Before that 7th book came out, my daughters said, "Daddy, what do you think is going to happen in the last book?" And I said a whole bunch of things, some of which actually were right. I knew that Dumbledore was going to die at a certain point. I knew, in the 6th book. But I said, one of the things I know is going to happen is at one point, Harry is going to die. And they were both like, "What?" And I said, "Or seem to die. Because he has to die to who he was to become who he's going to be." I was working on the Hero with 1,000 Days at the time, so that was very clear to me. So what I'm saying is, it's good to think of each book as an individual hero story. If you can, take a step back, look at the whole cycle, and, she starts in her backyard, bored with the world, and not wanting to sing anymore, right?
Right.
Well, I would love to get her back in her backyard at the end, only different. Loving music, loving singing, loving life in some way, or a different person than she was at the beginning. So that's a hero journey. And if you look at the road of trials, the tests that people go through, you can go through these more than once. Every romance is one sacred marriage after another. It works, it doesn't work, you're with the wrong person, you're with the right person, but then they get plucked away from you, and now you get to find them, and now you've got to go get them, and you've got to convince them to come back to you. Each of those is a sacred marriage. John.
So, this hero's journey provides a sort of a formula for a writer. Now, here's the challenge: is how do you use that formula without being formulaic?
Okay.
Because that's the challenge. Some of the things we read are formulaic. You know what's going to happen.
Do you guys? How many of you guys watched The Matrix? Matrix came out literally right around the time I was also working on The Heroes with a Thousand Faces. I watched that movie and liked it. It was a lot of fun. But I could literally hear the pages in The Hero with a Thousand Faces turning. It was so formulaic. Okay? Here's the truth. When I wrote this, if I were to tell you I didn't think about the hero journey at all when I was writing this, I would be telling the truth. But I had internalized it. I had internalized it because I watched Wizard of Oz as a kid. I internalized it because I loved The Hobbit. There and Back Again, right? Is the subtitle of The Hobbit. I internalized it because I had read The Hero with a Thousand Faces as a high schooler, as a college student, and then obviously as an adult. And so as I'm writing this, there were things that when I went back and looked at the book, I was like, oh, yeah, there it is. Okay? She starts and ends in the same place. Those sorts of things. But also the trials that she goes through are the trials of the hero journey. So, in fact, my advice to you, again, this is the same acting teacher who talked about the planets, the eccentricities. What he said is, learn it all, just get all the, do the exercises, learn the concepts, toss it out the window. Forget about it. Once you're writing, write. Now, when you're going back and editing, if you want to think, okay, why is this not working? Because, I'm staying in the world of the common day too long. I've spent 300 pages waiting for something to happen, and I haven't heard the call to adventure yet. I got to move the call to adventure earlier, and then either have the refusal of the call, like Jonah, who says, nope, not going to do it, or have the hero follow the call, in which case they're going to go someplace, either literally go someplace or psychologically go someplace different. I mean, Sam Spade never leaves San Francisco, but it's still a hero. Make sense? Any other questions?
What's the name of that movie with Sam Spade?
Oh, the Maltese Falcon.
Okay.
One of my favorite movies. Thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll be up here. I do have books.
A couple more questions.
Okay, a couple more questions.
I run a writers' conference in Belize that we work with children and teens and adults.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's a particular way to teach this with children.
Okay, there are a lot of wonderful teachers who have. Let me come up and I'll give you an email address, okay? Because there's a bunch of wonderful teachers. The Joseph Campbell Foundation, if you're interested in this stuff, jcf.org. We are a community of people who are interested in this stuff. So we talk about this a lot, and also there are a lot of resources available, including lesson plans. Okay? And I can put you in touch with the teacher who was organizing the education program for us. Okay. Now, most of the stuff was middle school and high school, so I don't know if it'll work as well for you. Because for the younger kids, it's still there. The younger kids understand the hero journey perfectly. They understand it intuitively and perfectly. But it's helpful. Middle schoolers and high schoolers love this. I've used this with students in high school, and it's really exciting for them because they feel like they understand it. And it's going to be different every time it's written. Make sense? Another? So do come up and talk. You are very welcome. Thank you. Any other questions?